Valediction forbidding mourning. Let's just start with that poem today. So we have been developing two separate perspectives through which to look at this poem. Of course, this poem is probably the most anthologized poem from the Renaissance, meaning if you're going to read a Renaissance poem, you'll probably end up reading this one. As I imagine, I think you've already told me you already or will have actually read it, right? So our question will be, part of the pedagogical question will be is, can we learn more in a class which is devoted to the Renaissance about this poem than we would normally in, let's say, a poetry class? So from our approach today, that we're talking about two different things which we've been working on so far. One is that we've been looking at Donnean poetry in relationship to precedent poetic traditions. Meaning we saw Marlowe and we saw Raleigh in their poems, A Passionate Shepherd to His Lover and The Nymph Responds. We saw them really kind of, Marlowe especially, taking the genre and absolutely kind of how did we describe it last time? We said that he masters the genre. I mean, but he also goes. But also we felt, some of us, that he goes over the top a little bit, and we almost saw that there's like a kind of cynicism in it, even as he's writing it, because people don't really talk to each other like this, right? Come live with me and be my love. So in the end, we strangely equated the perspective of Raleigh with Marlowe. Raleigh, of course, is much more explicitly cynical about the poem. But in a way, Marlowe, by writing the poem the way that he does, he's basically saying, I've had enough of this, right? I've had enough of this kind of poetry, mastering the genre, fulfilling. What I mean by mastering the genre is a little bit like what Tuvia said last week. Just like Shakespeare in As You Like It gives us all the weddings, in this poem, Marlowe gives us all of the possible pleasures that we might imagine getting from a pastoral poem. Take them, enjoy them. So we asked the question, then, well, what is Donne doing in the bait? Come live with me and be my love, and we will some new pleasures prove. And we really decided in some way that the poem is not about going fishing. It's not about lovers. I mean, it seems more like the latter than the former. I mean, we know what a metaphor is. But really, it seems to be about poetry. That is, Donne is writing in this tradition of Marlowe and Raleigh. And in a way, Donne seems to be saying to his audience, try reading me like you read Raleigh and Marlowe. If you read me literally, you end up with a ridiculous poem. And in that sense, Donne is baiting his audience and really instructing his audience that if you want to understand the poetry that I'm going to be writing, you can't understand it literally. In Marlowe and to some extent Raleigh, we said it's what you see is what you get. The poem is really a guided tour. What you see is what you get. That's all there is. That can't be the case in Donne's poetry. If what you see is what you get, then we imagine a fluorescent woman standing in a lake, like a fluorescent light bulb. Or we might literalize that metaphor, that lovely romantic metaphor, where little tiny fishies are coming and eating at the beloved's knees, right? We compared that to a place in the north of Israel where you go and you stick your feet in and little fish bite you. Has anybody done that here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun?
No.
Is it fun?
No.
It's not fun, right? Right, so nobody's going to write a love poem about that. But apparently, and Donne, strangely, does. So it seems in some way that Donne is suggesting that if you embrace only the literal, you're going to end up with a poem that is just ridiculous. And the poem demands that we see things from another perspective in another light. That was one context, meaning seeing Donne's poem in relationship, or Donne's poetry in relationship to the precedent tradition. We use the term, an older term, golden poetry, to refer to that pastoral poetry, and Donne is doing something different. He's developing this metaphysical conceit. So that's one thing we talked about. The other thing we talked about, and this goes way back already, is thinking about Donne writing in a context not only where new planets are being discovered, where the universe is expanding, where old conceptions of what the universe must look like are breaking up, but he's also living in a universe which he describes as all coherence gone, and atomies breaking up, parts and parts breaking up into smaller parts. on the one hand, Donne, as we said, is thinking of Galileo, Copernicus, Kepler. On the other hand, he's probably also thinking of Francis Bacon and this new kind of scientific methodology or proto-scientific methodology that Bacon is developing. And Bacon, as we said in Aphorism 55 in the Novum Organum, says there are two ways of looking at the world. One way is seeing similarities, one way is seeing differences. Bacon himself, we said, and the whole project that Bacon is anticipating, the scientific project, will emphasize breaking things up into particularity. And we asked, in relationship to that, what does a poet do? What does a poet do in a universe where people think that putting things together is, well, remember what Dr. Johnson said of Donne's poetry, that the most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. The most different things are yoked by violence together. So the poet, instead of being looked at as somebody who's creating some kind of truth, is just inventing relationships between things that really don't seem to be related one to another. Once Bacon's eye focuses on the world, all the things that I looked at as being parallel or in relationship or in a hierarchy with other things, now they look as if they are distinguished and distinctive. In a way, Bacon is taking away all the tools, or not the tools, some of the background metaphors and tropes that poets will use. Meaning we've seen how different writers will use that version of the Elizabethan world picture in order to structure the way they think, to show parallels. We saw that scene in Troilus and Cressida where Ulysses speaks. We read some of Hooker. We saw that his mind is kind of structured in this hierarchical way. So Bacon is ripping those things apart. As we saw him last time talking about the idea of the spheres, the 9 or 10 of them, that's just mythology. He says just a fiction. So Bacon breaks things up into parts. In doing so, he's kind of taking away that backdrop that allows poets so easily to find resemblances, such that later on, the critic, Dr. Johnson, can come and say about Donne, it gives a little bit of pleasure, but it doesn't make any truth claims. The most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. Do these things, according to Johnson, have any relationship one to another? No, because he's a Baconian, meaning he has inherited that scientific perspective and that scientific worldview. So that's another context in which we're going to look at this poem, meaning we started asking, how is the difference reading this poem in a course on poetry and in a course where we take into account historical context? We'll see if our reading is developed on the ones that you already have or developed in a poetry class. I think inevitably, as I'm suggesting, we're going to see more in this poem than you did last year, and that's no fault of the instructor last year. It's just that there are different demands in a poetry course, and we get to do different things in our course. Okay, so first let's read the poem together. Shall we do that? As virtuous, what's the poem called?
Forbidding Mourning.
A Valediction Forbidding Mourning. So it sounds like Donne is setting up some kind of dramatic situation. If we're going to do the dramatis personae for Donne's A Valediction Forbidding Mourning, whose presence is felt here? Who are the characters in this poem?
The lover and the two lovers.
The guy.
And the
We're going to simplify things.
the man and the
We're going to say the guy and the girl. Okay. So, and what is the dramatic situation?
that they're apart.
You're not giving. I want a full. You're not writing the screenplay. I want the full screenplay here.
One of them dies.
What is a valediction?
A memoriam.
Farewell, bye-bye, forbidding mourning. So now what's the dramatic situation? There's a guy and a girl. What's happening between them?
There's part
Close up.
of
The
Do you
narrator
want to have?
is
Do you want to choose
encouraging
what?
her not to mourn.
So the guy. So let's even give a little bit more of the backstory.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
To review a little, I have to read the poem and review
Well,
the
wait,
plot again in my mind.
you'll forgive the way that I'm referring to the guy and the girl. The girl is crying, and the guy, or maybe not. The guy is saying, "I'm going away, bye bye." And what is she doing?
She's sad.
She's saying, "Don't go," right? So the poet here is going to try to persuade. Sorry, the guy is going to try to persuade the girl
That it's not bad that he's leaving.
not to cry. Valediction, bye-bye, don't cry. So that's the dramatic situation. The poem begins, as virtuous men pass mildly away. So the poem starts strangely with death. I don't know why. As virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go, while some of their sad friends do say, the breath goes now, and some say, no. So let us melt, and make no noise, no tear flood, nor sight tempest smooth. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Men reckon what it did it meant, but trepidation of the spheres, their greater far, is innocent. If you're asking like what at this point, I'm with you, right? Okay? Dull sublunary lovers love. We'll have to talk about what those are. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which element it. But we, by a love so much refined, that ourselves know not what it is, interassured of the mind, care less, eyes, lips, and hands to miss. Our true souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion of my gold to airy thinness beat. If they be two, they are two so as stiff twin compasses or two. Thy soul, the fixed foot makes no show to move, but doth, if the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Such wilt thou be to me, who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. I gotta go. Thy firmness makes my circle just, and makes me end where I begun. Yeah, I started out thinking, only one poem will spend like, I don't know how much time we'll spend on it, but I don't even know if we have a whole hour now if we're gonna try to be able to explain this. It's a complicated poem, right? I know you're all enthusiastic about it, so all of you take a yawn now, everybody yawn, but let's go back to it. I'm going to skip the first stanza for the moment, okay? Maybe we'll go back to it. So he says, there's an as so, right? So, let us melt. It's bizarre because this is all about death. And I guess there in the first stanza, there are people who are dying. Virtuous men pass mildly away and whisper to their souls to go. Their souls departing from their body. While some of their sad friends do say the breath goes now, and some say no. So it's an uncertainty about whether this person who's dying is dead or he's in this liminal state. So, again, we'll come back to that. Let us melt and make no noise. What's he saying to her in the drama of the poem?
Don't make any noise.
Would you stop crying? Right? Okay? No tear floods, nor sigh tempests move. 'Twere profanation of our joys to tell the laity our love. What's he talking about? We're profanation of our love. What does profanation mean?
Deholy.
To render something profane. Where profanation would be to profane our holy love. To a profanation of our joys, to tell the laity our love. Who are the laity? Us, the common people, and he says, to a profanation of our joys, to tell the laity our love. How do we translate that in dramatic terms?
Their love is
Our love is
more than
private.
others.
Again, good, and it's very creative, but really he's just telling her again, shut up, right? To a profanation of our joys, to tell the laity our love. He's putting it in the poet is putting it in very highfalutin terms, as it were, but really what he's basically saying to her is, would you please be quiet, I want to leave. Moving of the earth brings harms and fears. Earthquakes. Men reckon what it did and meant, but trepidation of the spheres, though greater far, is innocent. Let's leave that alone for a moment also. one more time. Dull, sublunary lovers love. What's a sublunary lover?
Someone who loves at night.
Somebody who
Under the
loves at
moon.
night. Very nice, but that's not right. It's very, very creative, but no.
Well, no, a sublunary would be under the moon.
So sublunary literally means under the moon, right? So he's saying there are two kinds of people in the world. There are two kinds of people who fall in love. There's sublunary lovers, and then there are non-sublunary lovers. A sublunary lover is somebody whose everything, according to medieval physics, everything under the moon was thought to be imperfect, and everything over the moon was thought to be perfect. So just like they're a little bit like the Platonic realm of becoming and being, right? So over the moon is perfect. Now sublunary loves, now what will we imagine about them? What's the difference between a sublunary lover and a, I don't know, above sublunary lover? Which ones are you?
Is this rhetorical?
Are you a sublunary lover or or the other thing? Or better yet, would you rather be in love with somebody who's a sublunary lover or a, trans-sublunary lover? Why? What is the sublunary lover? So there are different kinds of lovers, right? Again, this is part of a conversation. And Donne is going to say there are different kinds of lovers. There's them and us. The sublunary lovers, they're them. What about them?
Is this logic versus following your heart, or
Sort of
Is
like
it- I
immature
didn't
conditional
understand.
love in a sense.
Well, sublunary means it's subject to change. Sublunary lovers love
Sort of
whose
fleeting,
soul,
like a fling, maybe.
a fling. There you go. So
Okay.
sublunary lovers love whose soul is sense. See, it's kind of a joke here. The soul of the sublunary lover is paradoxically sense. The soul should be he's using the word soul to mean essence. The essence of the sublunary lover is sense, but he uses the word soul to say that this sublunary lover is so dominated by sense that he's entirely made up of it, even his soul. One more time. Dull sublunary lovers love, whose soul is sense, cannot admit absence, because it doth remove those things which elemented it. So now we get a better picture. What is it about sublunary lovers? What can't they bear? What can't they possibly tolerate?
Being
Physical
without-
distance?
They can't be apart, right? What's that term? PDA,
Yeah.
right? So sublunary lovers, they need PDA, public displays of affection. You know, people like that, they're always touching each other, right? Because they're so much in love, or because they're not sure they're so much in love, right? They're so close together, and that's done with saying, well, there's certain kind of lovers, they need to be together all the time, because their soul is sense, meaning that's all they're really interested in is the physical. So if they're not with each other, then they're not doing the only thing they can do together, which is be connected with the senses. So they can't admit absence. But again, remember, this is part of this conversation and this persuasion. Remember, what's the dramatic context? The lover is telling the beloved, I'm going, but don't cry. So he's kind of providing this really logical argument and saying, well, some lovers, they can't admit absence, but their soul is sense. We're different kind of lovers, and therefore, bye-bye, right? Don't cry. But we by a love so much refined that ourselves know not what it is. Inter-assured of the mind. Lovely, right? So they're not together, but they're inter-assured of the mind. The refinement of their love allows them to be together even though they're apart. Careless eyes, lips, and hands to miss. It is a little strange that at the very moment that Donne is saying where these two lovers are inter-assured of the mind, what does he have us readers visualize? Eyes, lips, and hands. Even as Donne is saying, oh, we lovers are only spiritual, for, I guess, his audience and for us as readers, he gives us that very physical sense of things. Donne as a poet will never abandon the physical. He'll never abandon the sensual. as much as he is a metaphysical poet, which really is just a term, but sounds like it might apply to what we've been talking about, metaphysical, beyond the physical. If you just read Donne in terms of the physical, you're going to miss everything. But if you only read Donne in terms of the spiritual, you will also miss everything. That's why he's a really interesting poet.
So
But-
it's almost like he uses tangible imagery
Exactly.
to kind of like open up the,
Even,
you know,
even as
metaphor-
he says, into a short of the mind, he pulls us in. He doesn't abandon the senses. Okay, so again, this is part of the argument that he's making to the girl. What's the girl's response? Should we act this out? Just kidding. What's the girl's response? I mean, remember, she's at the doorstep, and he's about to go, and he's trying to convince her that it's okay. Is it okay at this point?
No.
A little bit.
She feels better, you think?
No.
Not really.
I mean, if we do a close-up on the beloved, what does she look like now? She's crying still, right? She's still crying. And we know that from the fact that he doesn't stop. He keeps on going. He's going to try again now. So let's see if this is going to work. A different argument. Our two souls, therefore, which are one. That sounds good, right? You buying, right? That makes you claustrophobic. Our two souls, therefore, which are one. Though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold to airy and this beat. You're on the phone with the guy. You're like, you got to do better than that, right? What is? Or maybe this is really good. Our two souls, therefore, which are one. It's interesting how in Donne's idea of love, the separateness of lovers is both, the separateness of lovers comes together. Meaning if we're thinking in terms of Baconian particulars, the two separate lovers, and remember, Donne himself writes in that poem, all coherence is gone, and he talks not only about physical properties of the universe, but also the relationships between people. That people are isolated. Every person has to be a phoenix. And here, these lovers actually are able to come together. Our souls, therefore, which are one, though I must go, endure not yet a breach, but an expansion, like gold, airy, thinness beat. What is he talking about? Did anybody figure out what this metaphor is, or what the vehicle of this metaphor is?
The vehicle is beaten gold.
Who beats gold?
Metalsmiths.
Metallicists, I think.
Metalsmiths.
I think we would say probably a goldsmith. I don't know if alchemists did that as well, but a goldsmith. Why would people want to do that?
To make thin wire.
To make thin wire. That's very practical. To make jewelry. Have you ever been invited to a
Golden
party where
bosses.
they serve? If you've been invited to Mar-a-Lago,
gold
have you gone to
leaf.
Mar-a-Lago? Any of you? They bring out cakes. I don't know if they do that there, but it fits that they might do it. And the cake has on top of it a thin layer of edible gold. Right? Here is an emblem of conspicuous consumption. How did we get onto that? I don't know. But that's what he's talking about. Like gold to airy thinness beat. So my love is like beaten gold. Is that? I mean, again, so again we have to, and this makes us remember. This makes us remember that other context. That if we're just going to see it literally, if we're going to read this poem like Marlowe's poem, we'll miss everything. What is he trying to express to his lover with like gold to airy thinness beat?
The purity of the love, because gold has to be very, very pure in order to be able to be beaten to that crown.
I thought I read it
Yeah.
as in gold, like kind of airy gold in relation to expansion, almost like when something thins out, it almost spreads out. So even if it's like kind of thin, it's like, you know, kind of diffusing, and it's like thinner, but then it's also like broadening.
Okay, well,
Like
we're
kind
going
of
to work
with
with that in a
the
second.
mirror,
Yes, you tell. Yeah.
mirror the expansion.
Go ahead.
Yeah, with expansion, where he's going, it's not that the love will be less. They're still going to be one.
That's very
But
nice. Right.
there's
So
like
that's
a
the
stretch
argument.
of the gold is still part of the air. It'll continue like this.
Okay.
It's
I was
like a
thinking a
far
little
reach,
bit more like my aunt was thinking about it, I think. But I see, he's in London. No, sorry, she's in London, and he's going to Paris, right? So he says, "Don't cry. Where our love is like gold to airy thinness beat." I think a little like Tikva was saying that it's pure, and like. My aunt was saying, but I think you can imagine the woman in London, she's part of this thinly beaten layer of gold, and he's in Paris, and somehow they're still connected, right? Not just the air, but they themselves are on this continuum. We are one. We're part of the same thing, like gold to airy thinness beat. Our souls, therefore, which are one. And where there's no breach, there's no break, you just expand and we're on this continuum. Does she like this metaphor? What is she, here I think we can hypothesize what she says from the line that follows. If they be two, they are two, so is stiff twin compasses are two. We'll get to that metaphor or that conceit in a minute. But what do we imagine she says for him to say, if they are two?
Well, that's very nice, but you're going away.
Right, come off it, right? Really, we're one? You're going to be in Paris and I'm going to be in London. So, nice try. Meaning, she looks at the metaphor, like gold to airy thinness speed. He's trying to pull something over on her. Like gold to airy thinness speed, yeah, you're going to still be far away from me. And it is, rather than an expansion, it's a breach. So then the poet says, if they be two, meaning conceding to her, right? Now he's going to have to work harder, right? That he's acknowledged that they're two. If they be two, they are two, so as stiff twin compasses are two. What's a stiff twin compass?
They go to the same
It's
direction.
what navigators use to move things
Right,
around
sometimes
the
people
map.
get confused because you remember 10th grade geometry class, and you had that compass that you would put to draw circles, right? Or you put it on the piece of paper. So this is a twin compass, I guess, like this, right? And this is, do we have to Google it, or everybody knows what it is, right? Yeah, we're good, right? So if they be two, they are two, so as stiff twin compasses are two. Thy soul to fixed foot makes no show to move, but doth if the other do. And though it in the center sit, yet when the other far doth roam, it leans and hearkens after it, and grows erect as that comes home. Donne is a little bit of a pervert, as you'll see here. No, if you had any doubts about that, have no doubts, okay? Such wilt thou be to me who must, like the other foot, obliquely run. Thy firmness makes my circle just and makes me end where I begun. It's interesting that the adjectives that you would associate with masculine sexuality he associates with the feminine, the erectness, the firmness. So, of course, this is a gendered version of the compasses. She stays home while he goes away, and she leans into him. There's a later poet in the 17th century named Catherine Phillips. She writes a poem like this to friendship, about friendship of two women, and instead of there being this asymmetry, there's a perfect symmetry between the friends. So it's an interesting rewriting of the poem to accommodate a different kind of relationship than this hierarchical male-female relationship. So he obliquely runs, he goes, thy firmness makes my circle just and makes me end where I begun. It's a lovely metaphor at the end, at the same time that he's obliquely running and kind of going, obliquely run means to kind of go off the path, to out of the circumference. But thy firmness makes my circle just and makes me end where I begun. I come back to you. This idea of this perfect circle of a relationship. And the circle was thought of, especially during the Renaissance, as being this symbol of continuity and perfection. And here she shuts up because it's such a great metaphor, she has to shut up. But then, 100 years later, Dr. Johnson comes along and says, such a great metaphor, are you crazy? Who compares lovers to compasses? My love is like a set of twin compasses. Who wants to do that? And therefore, he says, so not only does he read it in a kind of literal way to make it ridiculous, that is, he's not following Donne's instructions. If you read me, you cannot just read the literal image, because if you do, you're going to end up thinking that love is fish nibbling at a woman's knees, right? So he gives instructions to his readers about how to read. Dr. Johnson doesn't follow that instruction. He reads it, lovers and compasses? What's the connection? And he also says, he goes further and says that with Donne, the most heterogeneous ideas are yoked by violence together. These things don't belong to in relationship to one another. Lovers and compasses? And it's a good question. So, how does Donne, I guess what our question is, why would we say to Johnson, how could we convince Dr. Johnson 100 years later, you're wrong? Now, it might be hard to do that because he lives in a very different world. He lives in a world that Bacon bequeaths to him of particulars, of things categorized in different separate categories. So he really looks at compasses and lovers. And he looks at all of Donne's poetry and the followers of Donne. Donne was the major poet before Milton in the 17th century. Donne had all these followers, and they all outdid Donne. Somebody compared, I think Richard Crashaw compared angels who are crying to toilet bowls, something like really crazy. But he really does it, right? I'm not just kidding. Well, I'll show you next time. Anyway, how do we convince Dr. Johnson that this is an apt image? That it's not just the most heterogeneous, the most different ideas yoked by violence together. Again, Johnson says they may surprise and they may give us pleasure, but ultimately they have no truth to them.
Well,
Can we say that the poet actually is able to say true things here? Remember also we're thinking about the Baconian world, which is now pushing poetry out of the picture, right? In Bacon's world, we saw the development of truth and fiction, and fiction is far beneath the realm of truth. So our question is, can the poet actually make true claims? And if he does, what is he doing? How is he doing it with this image? Is Donne telling us something about love? And how do the twin compasses express it? I mean, it's another poem about poetry in a way, because the first couple of tries fail. But it's not really the woman in the poem who's not satisfied with the image. Of course it is. It's also the poet himself who's not satisfied with the image. And when she's happy, the poet, Donne, he's happy because he nailed it, right? He thinks, this I got right. So what is, and he rejects that image of pure continuity. He says, come off it. She says, come off it. Meaning you're not accounting for the fact that we are separate. I love the fact that you say we're one, but as Tikva said, you're here, I'm there, account for our separateness. In another way, you could say account for our particularity, account for the way in which we are different. So how does the compass metaphor, or conceit, how does it actually do both things? Account for similarity and difference. Remember, Bacon says there are two kinds of ways of looking at the world: seeing resemblances and seeing differences. Now, Donne is with this conceit, he's allowing for simultaneously resemblance between the lovers and difference between the lovers. But I just want somebody to explain it to me. Tell Johnson that he's wrong. We tell Dr. Johnson, don't fixate on that compass, right? Go beyond it. What does the compass represent? We're not saying it's a symbol of anything, but what does it represent? Pardon?
Sticking together.
So-
and at the same
Connection?
time, they're not really sticking together. So it's like this.
So to accommodate the sticking together, the South is saying that sticking together, that's the top of the compass, right? So the very physicality of this object simultaneously allows for both things. On the one hand, are they one?
No.
They are. On the other hand, are they separate?
No.
I mean, the object itself takes us into the realm of paradox. That's why it's such a great conceit.
it's kind of
We would think, twin compasses? What a stupid metaphor, right? My love is like twin compass. But Donne is showing the paradox of true love in this paradoxical device that simultaneously is one thing and two things. So the end of the poem, you see why Donne is so happy with himself, right? Because by the end of the poem, he's able to accommodate both difference and similarity. And the complaints of the lover, the complaints of the poet, oh, we're just unified. Well, that's true. People are never completely unified. In a relationship, the relationship that Donne is actually writing about is a relationship that allows for simultaneously similarity and difference. Because otherwise, it's narcissism, or it's two different kinds of narcissism. If love is only similarity, then I just see myself in the lover, and we really are one thing because the other person is erased, right? Right? Mm-hmm. Meaning, and that's just, that's the PDA couple, right? They just need each other for themselves. They're fulfilling, it's young love. They're fulfilling some kind of psychic need, right? I need you to be part of me. If you only emphasize difference, then you're just talking about isolated individuals. Maybe, I'll pick up dinner, let's meet at the club later, right? Who are just somehow related contractually, but really they're totally different people. So Donne is saying that in order to have a genuine relationship, you need to accommodate for difference to move away from the narcissism of seeing everything as self, and you have to see similarity because that's what love is. So we said we were going to start off today thinking about this from a slightly different set of perspectives, and I think we have. On the one hand, we see the difference between what Donne does and Marlowe does. Donne is really challenging his readers in the bait. Don't read this way, I'm baiting you. And once we get to his other poetry, we see that we have to move past just the simplicity of what that object is. And the second thing we saw is, Donne is writing in a Baconian universe. Donne is so aware of difference. He's so aware of the possibility of a world falling apart. And here, in this poem, he's trying to show the way in which there still is the possibility of relationship. In a way, he's saying there still is the possibility of writing poetry. Let's take a break now. Should we do that? Yeah? Can you push the button to turn this one on? Anybody have any questions in the meantime? It's a great poem, right?